All right. Welcome back to Side Quests IX, Episode 3, Final Fantasy IX. Back with me, my constant companion and party member, Master Thrash. Just kidding, Wes Schantz.
That's okay. We need to have the animal companions for this game. It seems like everyone has a little bit of either a pig nose or a monkey tail or whatever's going on with Cinna and Blank and all that.
Yeah, and Blank's sacrifice, which is something that in my little pseudo summary here, or piecemeal summary, skeleton crew summary I didn't even have that mentioned in Petrifying Forest.
Oh
But
yeah.
you did touch on something I really do want to talk about, but not right here in the beginning. But I do want to talk about the aesthetic compared to Final Fantasy VIII and VII a little bit. I know that we've done that before, but I would like to continue to do that when talking about my own experience playing back through this game. But
Mhm.
just to lay some things out for those who are listening about what we played through this time. We're still early in the game, and we've just made it to a forest called the Evil Forest. That is its proper name. And perhaps we'll have to discuss whether that idea is subverted or leaned into. And in fact, that's something I really want to talk about, whether this is a game that not only includes, but whether it leans into rather than subverting traditional themes, more like a Dragon Quest. But in any case, we start in the Evil Forest, and Garnet has been stolen by this very treacherous looking prison plant that is like a Venus flytrap, perhaps going to ingest and digest her, though it we find out it has taken her to the master of the forest, which
Yeah.
is we find out an even more carnivorous or larger carnivorous plant with the same sort of fire weaknesses. We're exposed to uh, or rather, we learn of the power of Vivi. We have two fights right in a row against the same sort of plant, but in the second one, we have access to Vivi's fire magic, and we start to learn something about types and type matchups. We also have a couple different instances of meeting the Mog older brother who acts as a tutorial
Yeah.
for us, though we can skip all of them if we want to, which is quite nice, even though I don't remember this game as well as I probably should. I still skipped a lot of what he had to say. After fighting the the boss, the heart of the forest quickly becomes petrified, which seems to have some pretty bad negative implications for your friends. You see Blank push you out of the way, and before this, it's been developed that he's always helping Zidane for some reason or another. Who knows why? Perhaps you have a theory or a hypothesis for that. But before Zidane gets picked up by the forest that's chasing after the crew. Now, Blank pushes him out of the way and is himself petrified in a way that is somewhat reminiscent of the Avalanche members who die while attempting to destroy the Mako reactor in Midgar before the plate falls, or before the plate falls. And I think it does, in fact, fall on them. I seem to recall. In any
Yeah.
case, the and perhaps your old crew, which you have now left, is also petrified. We then go through the ice cavern and fight Black Waltz there. Zidane fights the Black Waltz alone. This looks like a sort of uh, dark angel version of Vivi.
Right.
And one wonders what the relationship is between Waltz and Vivi, and he's casting this sort of blizzard magic that also puts Steiner, Garnett, and Vivi to sleep. And then we see the two twin jesters from Alexandria and the Court of Braun, um, who apparently say that Black Waltz 2 and 3 will finish the job. And so
Yes.
there's some sort of assassination attempt going on. I don't know if they meant to say full assassination or whether they are, in fact, attempting to assassinate, though Queen Braun wants Garnet alive, and whether there are differing interests at play there.
Mhm.
And then I made it into the village of Dali, and Princess Garnet, now renamed Dagger, had to go through the embarrassing task of learning that she would, in fact, be sleeping with three other people in a village or a countryside suite, which is a single room, rather than her own spot. But the sort of things I wanted to mention, besides just trying to give a little bit of the summary, and I know that you're going to fill in the mini gaps that I left my friend, is that Garnett mentions that her life has been lived in books. So this
Mhm.
makes me think of, to a correlate, another Disney princess, Belle from Beauty and the Beast,
Yeah.
with her nose stuck in a book. Garnet is renamed, and so we have issues of identity here. She goes from Princess Garnet to Dagger. She has to ask what a dagger is, in fact, and and she also has to change how she speaks. Though I do also want to ask, in the same way that the forest is called Evil Forest, is it is the return to having class, which is actually called race in this work, um, does that increase player freedom or does that decrease player freedom? I wonder if in a time of questions of identity and self-transformation, whether being given a class is more regressive or progressive as a gameplay mechanic at this point, especially thinking about the freedom that Final Fantasy VII, VIII, and X all give one to kind of refashion
Mhm.
characters. Even if they're meant to be a blue mage, they can become a black mage or a white mage, and there may be, and that might take longer, but it's possible, particularly with the sphere grid in Final Fantasy X. Um, I also wanted to mention the fighting in this game is very interesting. It does, like Chrono Trigger, seem to require a little bit of strategy. Most enemies have some tricks up their sleeves that can bum you out. Like recently in the Ice Cavern, I ran into one that if you didn't kill this creature in one hit, it was a creature that recurred over and over again. It could do this thing called HP swap,
Yes.
which is when it's down to like 20 HP and I'm at like 150 is really annoying. Especially because casting magic and using items is pretty costly in this game, though I'm stealing as much as I can in order to get things back. But to that point, having a white mage, a black mage, a knight, and a thief, it's almost as if it's already decided for me what these characters are going to do in battle.
Yeah.
Heal, cast magic, fight, steal. And so I am really interested in what your experience of that is. Let me see, just two more things to mention. There's a Vivi seems to lack self-confidence, though he's called Master Vivi by Steiner and is considered a being of extraordinary power and certainly has a power that none of us have in terms of casting fire magic at this point. And then there's a strange interaction between Steiner and Zidane, where Zidane says that, who do you think you are to try and boss me around? He's like, he's just left his boss in this stylized, dramatized show fight.
Yes.
And so he's taking that pretty seriously. And now that Steiner is in the woods and outside of in Alexandria, but outside of the court, it's a little unclear who is the dominant force in the pecking order. I would say that Zidane, after not succumbing to Black Waltz, has sort of shown himself to be the superior, to be the more dominant character at this point. But it is interesting that he refused to take orders, and in fact, sort of Cypher-like, gave his own oath to defend Garnet as well, and so has sort of in his own way knighted himself. Um, and so I think that's all I wanted to mention. I do notice that there is a card game. I have not played it yet. I wonder if you have. I know you are a great player of side quests.
No, no. I did a little bit with Vivi back in Alexandria. There's like a tutorial about the card game um, that the Alleyway Jack character will provide there, and I played like one game against him, but I I didn't see a point in doing more than that, and I haven't actually been challenging anybody really since then. It's occurring to me that yeah, maybe you could have challenged some of the members of the troop and gotten rare cards or something like that. I don't know. Um, but as far as I recall, as far as I know, the cards don't convert in the same way as FF8 to like actual items and spells and such. So I don't think that there's as much of a incentive in this game to try to really go too far down that rabbit hole. I could be wrong about that. There might be some, you know, um, either plot, theme or mechanical reason to go into that. I kind of think it's just an extra thing to do, though, just a pure mini game. Um, So yeah, when you mentioned Zidane and Steiner having this kind of uh, struggle for dominance, right, within the party, and the way that Steiner, on the other hand, like defers to Vivi, right? Um, Whereas my whole impression of Vivi is as like this sort of helpless figure who I want to protect, much in the way that Zidane Steiner both want to protect the princess. Um, I find, yeah, that dynamic is quite interesting. In some sense, they all defer to Garnet, right? She has this kind of nobility. She is, in some sense, the leader, and she's like the reason for them all being together at this point. Steiner listens when she says she doesn't want to go back. He's not gonna deliver her into the hands of Zorn and Thorn or whoever else might be her captors against her will. Um, so there is something strange about like the way that the class of Zidane as thief does and doesn't like match up with his personality and his like aspirations, um, because he does seem like while that is his ostensible power, like in battle, he's got this other thing that triggers whenever he's it's not a limit break in this game, it's the trance system, but it's the same idea. It's like you take certain amount of damage from enemies and you reach a point where certain other abilities are unlocked. And I think that's pretty important in this game. Again, not just like mechanically, but also thematically. Um, I think that him kind of letting that happen, not really caring about why it's happening, is very reminiscent of a squall, right? This kind of like whatever approach to what's going on. But Steiner is like blown away. He's like, "Whoa, I've heard of trance, but I've never actually seen it. Like this is amazing. I didn't know it was real." I think even the Mogster is like, I don't know if it's even a real thing or just like a rumor, right?
Yes.
So there's something pretty important about that, and in his case, it unlocks like magical abilities. So he does have MP. Even Steiner has MP, but Steiner's trance is just like physical attacks do more damage or something. Um, he just sort of becomes more himself, if that makes sense. Whereas Zidane, it's like truly kind of a transformation. He looks more sort of like Super Saiyan, I guess you'd say,
Yes,
right? It's like
very
sort
much.
of
It's like purple. He's a little more simian looking.
yeah,
His
yeah,
tail's more prominent and like actually like more like standing up rather than
yeah,
hanging down. And you kind of don't notice his tail most of the time, but he's
yeah,
clearly has
yeah.
a tail.
That's right. And and at least against the Black Waltz and the Sea Lion kind of monster it summons, that that fire ability, the tidal flame from him, it's mirrored by their like water and ice magic, right? But the flame magic, it does way more damage. It took out the black mage in one hit, the Black Waltz, and the Sea Lion in another hit, because you get like two or three turns of having trance, right? So it really does seem like, at least with that mechanic in place, he's your key party member. Like, because as of now, Garnet can't summon anything. We don't really know how powerful she'll turn out to be. And Vivi, as powerful as his magic is, it's nothing compared to what Zidane's Dine trance abilities are doing, right? So yeah, and it also seems like he's kind of uh developing as a character like more obviously than the others right now. Um, Steiner is pretty set in his I'm going to protect the princess, and just like how much that conflicts with his other loyalties seems to be the kind of dilemma as per his like title card. Um, with Vivi, we don't know much about him. We know that he's lost his grandpa. He mentions that, right? And he seems to be all alone. He seems to be, you know, in need of some guidance. Um, Garnet does have this moment where she changes her name, and maybe that's signaling something more of like she certainly wants to blend in and not like betray everybody by her presence, right? Like she's too obvious, and so she has to sort of change how she carries herself, how she speaks, and things. But that doesn't seem like a very profound transformation. We don't know what's really going on with her, like why she left the castle and all that. So maybe there's more there. But with Zidane, it's like the clearest like change, right? He's left his troop. He fights the father figure of Baku, who I still theorize is like a Hironobu Sakaguchi stand-in or something, right? Like that seems, and so he's like setting off on his own. His kind of alter ego Blank, right? Um, they seem to have some kind of like a rivalry, almost like Pokemon, right? You have your rival Pokemon trainer or something. It's like it's not real rivalry because Blank is super weak, but whatever. He seems to think it is, and so you've left that whole chapter of Zidane's life. Again, we don't know his backstory, what came before, but he's setting on this other kind of quest. He's being this other kind of hero, essentially. Yeah, um, and he does have this kind of like suaveness about him, right? He wants to kind of impress the ladies. Uh, in small ways, this comes up like when you go to the one gate area. It's like there's a gate down in the mist, and there's a gate up above. And in both cases, the gate is closed, and you can, in the misty area, you can sort of like see that there's flames or smoke coming up from behind it, and you can interact with it, and a woman's voice will speak. And Zidane has this whole little moment of like trying to pick up this woman who can't even see, and then he's like, oh shoot, wait, Garnet's with me, like I can't do that. So there's like this internal monologue where he's like changing his normal approach to yeah, be more appropriate to his circumstances. And he seems to really have like a flashback too about Garnet, like where he's worrying about her in the forest, right? And we have a kind of like memory of where she first runs by him, which had a very like Clouds Memories kind of feel to it. Um, it's got kind of like spooky music playing.
Into
Um, hmm Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I think to the question about like the class system here and the player's freedom, I think you're right. It's developing a kind of a clearer role for each of the characters in battle for sure, and setting up some expectations that they may or may not, subvert in some way throughout the story. Um, as far as the player's agency, it's pretty minimal. I mean, you have like certain choices in dialogue from time to time, but really, yeah, what you do in battle is the main way that you're truly interacting, like the way you set up your party to prepare for battles and everything. And and even that is taken away at times, right? So like the big fight against the Black Waltz, your whole party's asleep. It's just Zidane. So that really throws the player for a loop a little bit. And if you aren't strategic, if you aren't, stealing stuff that you need to steal, this game can become a lot harder pretty quickly, I think. Um, so yeah, I don't know about whether there's more or less freedom. On the one hand, it frees you from a lot of tinkering around in the systems, like especially early in FF8, that's a ton of like learning curve that you have to do. Whereas in this game, it's pretty transparent. Like you equip items, you assign gems to the abilities that you want to learn. Um, it's pretty clear, and if you don't get it, there's a really like in your face tutorial that comes along and is like, hey, here's how you do this. If you want to learn it, watch the tutorial. Um, whereas, yeah, previous games, you had a lot more kind of leeway to mess around in the menus. In this game, I think that you're, going to spend more time exploring the world, engaging in conversations and battles and exploring and stuff, versus messing around in the stats and the menus and things. Um, but as far as like, yeah, what you can do to customize each of the characters, it's a lot less. It's also clear that the game will forcibly, pick and choose which characters are with you. We don't have a choice about that, at least not yet, and it'll sometimes surprise you with that. Um, so yeah, I thought that was a pretty interesting like moment for Zidane, and particularly the way he chooses not to tell the rest of the party.
mm,
That was a place where um, I thought it would be it might have been an interesting point at which the game could have offered the player a choice. Like, do should I tell them or should I keep it a secret? Because I think there's, good argument for either one. In my read of it is he's trying to protect Vivi from certain knowledge that is probably bouncing around in the player's mind at least, and probably his too. Like, oh, that thing that was created that's coming after us, it sure looks a lot like you if you had like devil wings or whatever, and we're a little bigger. So I take it to be him, sparing Vivi from something. Now, whether in the long run that's really doing him a service or not remains to be seen. So,
That's really interesting because I think what you're revealing is that Zidane possibly is complicated in ways that Squall and Cloud and I can't really say Locke because perhaps he's partially modeled off of Locke, right? Both as thieves and initial protagonists. Um, but yeah, you're right that he is really sprouting. He's and I think this is in line with the aesthetic of the game, is more childish in that he 100% makes his choices, doesn't put a lot of forethought into them, but he really sprouts where he's rooted, as it were. Like he sees this pretty girl, he knows he's got to go after her, and nobody blames him, and so he does it. And then he fights against this Black Waltz, but then he keeps this knowledge to himself, which could help solidify himself in his sort of fight with or conflict with Steiner. Also impress Garnett, obviously. So he's really weighing, in a mature way, weighing the advantage of impressing this person who he has a crush on against hurting this person who's his sort of new friend and comrade. And to that point, I want to offer diverging I want to say diverging things.
Go for it.
On the one hand, I see a repeat of Final Fantasy VIII's orphan motif. Garnet, obviously missing a father. Zidane, very Peter Pan-esque, except for he's developing. He seems to be outside of the Neverland world, and in fact makes it out of this evil forest and off of this flying ship, out of all these sort of mythical sorts of places, with his feet on the ground and dealing with the cold and dealing with human relationships on his own and really maturing. But Vivi has lost his grandfather and also seems to be out on his own. And so Steiner, it's hard to say with him. He's sort of a Barrett figure, right? He's like this early middle-aged guy who's a little bit bland, a little bit dumber than those. Barrett is done with his vernacular, and he's always swearing. Steiner is just sort of comic relief, right? It's Zidane likes to make fun of him, and he gets upset about that, and he's a little stuffy in his personality. It seems like he has a lot of growing to do too, but it's unclear whether he has lost his Marlene or his wife in the same way that Barrett had, would seem to have. I guess Marlene came from dying, right? And so, yeah. So Steiner may have lost people, but what I'm getting at is that all of these characters, or at least 3/4 of them at this point, have depths that are unexplored. And it would seem that this game, if it is going to subvert the seemingly static identities, has a lot of rich material for doing that. And so, saying that, I would still say that I am currently not super engaged in this game because of its aesthetic. Even though I have now gotten the Legend of Final Fantasy IX in the same way I got the Legend of Final Fantasy VIII to try and pick up on various bits of lore that I don't know. The kiddie style of the game, the sort of over stylized, funny dialogue between characters, it does not yet have the force for me that a conversation while trying to infiltrate a Mako reactor with guys with guns trying to shoot me had. Final Fantasy VII, or in Final Fantasy VIII, going on that initial mission and having that terrible spider coming after us. Even though we've had difficult fights and the fighting is sort of tricky in this game, but for different reasons from VIII. You don't have to learn how to do that, to customize your characters in complicated ways, as well as realize very early on how important the card game is and what you have to do in order to maintain that advantage, as it were, with the Queen of Cards quest and keeping the random rule from taking effect. This game is much more straightforward in a Final Fantasy X sort of linear way. You have the characters that you have. There are 4 that you can use in battle, and there will be a switch mechanism. So that will add a
Mm.
lot of complexity to battle in a way. But it's the starting point. The characters seem to have depths that are unexplored, but they're so sort of childishy that it's hard to take the seriousness of their situations. Like Garnet could have almost died and was in serious danger.
Yeah.
And Steiner knew this and seemed to be taking this very seriously, even while he's sick, having taken a potion that sort of makes one sick in order to heal one because of this really creepy effect where these plants shoot their spores into somebody
Yes.
and then are that's how they recreate themselves. I don't know if it's like an alien where they sprout out of you, or like one of those crazy parasites in the moth in the wasp that takes over its brain, or whatever it is. It seems to be like some sort of horrific death that's leading towards somebody, as well as Garnet being ostensibly sort of Venus flytrap absorbed.
Hmm.
And when I played Final Fantasy VIII and Renoa was junctioned by Adele, I used really strong language about losing agency and having one's body sort of violated by
Hmm.
another
Hmm.
person in consciousness. But even though this is in some ways a similar thing, and there's even sort of the Dante, like Lucifer consuming a sinner sort of notion there. Those those connections don't occur to me, and those forceful words and concepts also don't occur to me. It's as if they had 4-ounce gloves on like mixed martial artists, but now they put 12-ounce gloves back on, and they're like, no, it's the same fight. um don't worry, it even if it
Yeah.
feels different right now, it will be the same. And I think that is actually what's happening, right? And their move to be more integrative, summative, and also to move backwards. This is
Hmm.
not a progressive subverting game yet. This is a compendium, bringing things back, wrapping things together.
Yeah.
But because of that, I think there's less freedom to explore differing options with how one's character manifests, precisely because one has to consciously attempt to push the envelope.
Hmm.
Whereas here they are sealing the envelope or putting the last few things in. And that creates a very different player experience. And so my big hypothesis is that what I think Final Fantasy VII and VIII did is they hit the cultural moment that sort of middle school and high school kids, that in the late 90s, certainly in America, perhaps also in Japan, there's a real push towards self-fashioning,
Hmm. Hmm.
dressing however one wants in a non-traditional way. Final Fantasy VII and VIII characters did a great job of that, and being able to sort of become who one wants to be. And so one's characters, you sort of play them how you want to. Quistis is clearly a blue mage, but you can junction, you can make her very strong by junctioning
Hmm.
Ultima to her strength, although it makes more sense to junction to her magic, but you can do what you want. That's,
Her
yeah,
her fan club would be like, yeah, make her as strong as possible.
yeah, right,
They
right.
want that.
Don't use the battle because that'll ruin your perception of her.
Uh,
Like Melina from Mortal Kombat. But the effect, just like you didn't like Final Fantasy VIII at first, and I hypothesized that many people didn't like it because it was complicated. They didn't understand the junctioning system. There's too much romance in it. There are no sprites anymore. It's not middle age setting, or sorry, Middle Ages setting. I'm really fixated on Middle Age. Too much Tolkien, I guess. Middleheim. Um, but that so I think they made the shift to 9 precisely because of all those feelings that were created in their longtime fans or their current fans by 8. But for me, it had the opposite effect. Rather than a return, it was, to me, and continues to be, startling. And a lot of what I liked about Final Fantasy VII and VIII that made them different from 6, 5, and 4 is now missing from 9. But those things that are missing are what the sort of traditionalist Dragon Quest Final Fantasy players were missing in 7 and 8. And
Yeah.
so I have this odd experience of thinking, well, I think this game is going to be better than I recall it being, but I do not feel as connected to it as
Mhm.
7 and 8 because of its stylistic choices and its gameplay choices so far.
Yeah. No, I picked up on that battle thing as well with the plants having your party member inside of them. And so it becomes kind of an obligation to keep them alive, almost more than defeating the plant. Um, that did seem like a direct callback to that fight but so it's very different because that's like towards the end of 8. You have a strong relationship built up with those characters. There's a lot more kind of at stake, if you will. In this case, it's like almost generic, right? We're in a forest. Okay, so there's some evil plants. Okay, there's not really a reason why they're being evil. It's just because it's the evil forest, like of course, duh, you know. And and that's yeah, that just feels a lot less impactful. I think that the sleep thing as well, the effect of the blizzard leading to sleep, and then your one character somehow hearing the ringing of the bell and waking up, that has a kind of mythical feel to it. But since we don't know much about like what's going on or why, it also feels a bit arbitrary. Like, okay, he's super duper strong for some reason. He's just a dude with a dagger. As far as we know, he's always just been that, and been part of this, this crew that goes around and performs plays, and they're a bunch of thieves. So I think these maybe are seeds that will, have some kind of payoff later. Um, but yeah, the same way like the sacrifice of blank, it just doesn't feel that important because he's such a kind of non-entity per his name, right? He does save your party, right, with his medicine. And again, that just sort of comes out of nowhere. He just happens to know, like, oh, that's what the plant is doing. So here's this medicine; it'll help you. Um, yeah, but then he has a pretty dramatic, petrification sequence where he like throws this thing to you, and you think it's like a very important thing. It turns out it's just like the map. It's not like a recipe for the potion or the whatever. And Zidane does make a remark like maybe we can heal him later. So there is the sense that maybe we'll revisit this at some point. But it is pretty casual. Like, oh, all of my friends probably are petrified in that forest. Oh well, time to go like go off with this princess and these people. It's just like kind of jarring, like tonally. And I felt like there were places in the evil forest where, again, like you look off in the distance and you see a waterfall, and there's a moment where your character's asking, like, I wonder where that river goes, or something like that, right? Um, it's doing some world building, but it immediately shuts that down by like petrifying the whole forest, sending you on a very one track. You can only go through this next place, the ice cavern, right? There isn't really a lot to explore there. Um, and the most evocative place so far, Alexandria, is completely out of reach. It's like up on the cliff. We flew away in the airship, and so we don't get a further chance to explore that or anything that's going on with those characters. So everything so far has been kind of like a bait and switch almost of like, here's all these cool characters, here's this whole cool world. All right, now that's closed off to you. Go on to the next place. Same thing with the forest. Like maybe this could be an interesting thing to go and explore more and find out what's up, but no, it's completely petrified now. So we're off to the next place. The ice cavern itself, it has a cool gameplay mechanic that's introduced where you can like interact with things and Vivi will light them on fire. So like you could see them doing a lot more with that. Like it takes that idea of like, well, light the candle. Like how? I don't know. Just like push the button. Well, there's like actually a reason. Like you have fire magic, you can burn stuff. But it only lets you do that where you're supposed to do it. It's not like you can just try shooting fire around you and have like more of a Legend of Zelda style experience, right? Um, so it's a little bit like, again, that feeling of it's like there could be more here, but there just isn't. It's just kind of a bit superficial. And I agree. Like this game, as I said, it doesn't live in my mind, in my imagination, and light up, all of those connections uh, at all to the same extent as seven or even eight, right? Um, to say nothing of six for ones that I played earlier and maybe when I was in a more formative state or whatever. And yeah, I think as much as it's going for that recapturing of that magic, um, I'm not convinced. I'm willing to, stick with it and see, but um, there's certain things. Here's a big picture theory that I would throw out. Like the way that we have the evil forest, um, kind of taking the idea of the mist as well, right? Like this kind of shadowy, cold. It isn't petrification directly, but it tends towards petrification, right? Like stillness, stasis. That seems to be the evil forest. You don't get out. Well, they got out, right? That's good. But the forest itself is petrified. You can't go back. You can't explore it. I feel like that might be Final Fantasy, you know? It's trying to go back to a thing that is closed to it. And it really needs to listen to its own, gameplay loop and just progress and go forward. Um, those games exist. Like we can go back and play them. We don't need another kind of twist on that whole thing. And the whole idea that Sakaguchi seems to have, according to Resonant Arc, is that he wants to make this kind of diorama or puppet show kind of experience for the player. But um, there's a more, I think, involved form of that you get from Shigeru Miyamoto and his team. They always talk about like the miniature garden approach, like this kind of garden in a box, and it's a growing and a living thing versus the diorama, which is, you're moving things around, you're doing, and I just think of the two, the garden is the more vibrant image. I'm not sure why Sakaguchi is so fixated on this diorama thing. I think it might have to do with control, right? Wanting to really control things and really, again, that detracts from the player's agency and freedom to explore, to try out things. And so I think there might just be a disconnect there where, um, the evil forest, uh, instead of petrifying it, could we purify it? Could we make it a living place again? Could we make it a miniature garden of some kind or even a forest, right? That's what it wants to be somehow. That's what I want it to be anyway. So um, there's elements there too, like I don't know if this is accurate, but the music seems to be echoing some of the Final Fantasy VII, specifically the Shinra motif, where it's just like a little bit dissonant, but it's basically the same notes. And and I thought of that as being like a kind of, I don't know, callback or something to like appeal to that grandeur, that feeling of exploration after you get out of Midgar and you're finally like seeing the world. It's so big, it's so interesting. Um, and you even hear the music of the march, right? Rufus's Shinra march is played by the orchestra members who are surviving after the crash. They want to build up the morale of the party or whatever, and so that's one of the active time events that you can view and listen to that. And so it's like it's doing this direct callback to Seven of all things, and it just sits uneasily with the rest of the kind of medieval slash Renaissance slash fairy tale world. Um, it's fun, it's cool, but I don't know if it quite uh, is as exciting as immediately compelling as those earlier games.
Okay, well, you said several things that just set off a bunch of fires in my mind in the way that this game hasn't yet.
Okay,
So
good.
I really want to mention that something that happens in Dante, but not yet in this work, but perhaps will happen, is the purification of the forest.
Mm,
Same way that one starts in a Selva Escura. At the top of the
yes,
story gets to terrestrial paradise, which is itself the pure form of the forest. Where there's a
it
bunch
has the Garden of Eden on top, right? It's
of
like
Garden of Eden. That's the other
yeah.
name. And in fact, there's a processional, a drama that plays out in front of one that
Mm,
involves a tree that comes back to life, but is eventually it's sort of plucked and an eagle descends from it. It's a very complicated, allegorical drama that plays out, and not the only one that one sees. In fact, in Purgatory, there's a strange drama in Anti-Purgatory where one sees a snake shoot off by two angels. But in any case, the idea of not going back. And
Mm.
so, right, so this is Dante not being Orpheus. He doesn't just go down into the underworld where one
Mm.
can't take something back. He's going up to heaven. He's not simply trying to go back into the past or go somewhere that one is not supposed to be able to go. He's going to sort of this Christian version that involves a rejuvenation
Hmm.
or a renovation. But what you're observing is there's sort of, unlike Dante, more like Orpheus, perhaps an attempt to go back and to bring Eurydice, the wife, back into the to recapture the past is what this
Hmm.
is all an allegory for. And that is a doomed endeavor from the get-go. And
Yeah.
perhaps we as literary and ludic critics, with pretty good amount of experience at this point, are really sensitive to that. Because something we liked about Final Fantasy VIII was was what a lot of people disliked was that it allowed so much freedom and was so innovative with the junction system and the connection between junctioning, magic and cards and being able to and the ontology of turning a monster into a card and is very Matrix like sort of mise en scène of Final Fantasy VIII. The one is got some strange powers and abilities to be sort of super powered
Hmm.
there. Whereas Final Fantasy IX, I don't see that mechanic at play yet. By this time in the game in Final Fantasy VIII, I could be overpowered and great at cards, and in this game, it's far more like Final Fantasy X, which is sometimes described as almost entirely linear
Hmm.
in circumscribing one's freedom. And I will say that at this time, there was a subgenre of the RPG that was moving in the opposite direction. This was very close to the creation of the MMORPG, and EverQuest in particular, I think, was coming out right around this time. And so there may have been also not only a pushback against Final Fantasy VII and VIII, but a pushback against what an RPG truly is. We have action RPGs, we have MMORPGs, open world RPGs, and more linear slash or even more cinematic RPGs like Xenosaga and
Hmm.
Xenoblade that or even Hogwarts a Legacy where it's a lot of watching rather than.
Yeah.
But okay, that was the smallest point I wanted to mention. The larger point was a thematic one. This work seems to be modeled off of a theatrical production and seems to want to invite us to interpret it along the lines of a theatrical production, in particular as if it's going to have one act, two act, three acts. How do I justify this? Well, a little future bit is one of the characters, the main antagonist for a large bit of the game, Kuja, will himself, I believe, constantly quote a theater, and he will himself, a theatrical play, and he will himself talk about Act One and Act Two
Hmm.
happening. He is himself obsessed with the notion of theater. Of course, we started at a theater, and Zidane is himself an actor, and has had these sort of stylized fights with his boss so far, which were themselves, I thought, dramatized performances. But I wonder if this, because I thought we were both pretty moved by the introduction, the introductory scene, as it were,
Yeah.
to this game, and how instead of using a long cinematic like Final Fantasy VIII did, it used a long introductory sequence to introduce us to the game. That itself was pretty innovative. But I wonder if this is something like the intermezzo, or almost something I'd want to ask Ben about whether there is some convention within theater where after a strong beginning, there's sort of it slows down
Hmm.
a bit. Because, right, like you've said, obviously many seeds are being planted, and we can see that things are being developed, and there might, and especially the relationship between Braun and Garnet, what's going on there. There's this mist. What is it doing? Monsters come from it. So they came from the moon in eight. They came from Shinra in seven. But now they come from this mist. What is this mist doing there?
Yeah.
I wonder, is the mist itself supposed to be the veil of ignorance that we ourselves are supposed to supervene? Is it what our characters are supposed to supervene? if I wanted to be critical, I would say, is it a mark of undevelopment or
Mm,
underdevelopment of the world? You mentioned that there are these scenes, these small scenes, like where does this stream go? But also there's a lack of emotional impact, which itself suggests underdevelopment to me. When I think
yeah.
of what Xenogears, so the forest is an
Yeah.
we talked about it, archetypal place in medieval and Renaissance literature and drama, place where transformation can happen, and we've just seen petrification. Xenogears, one has major conversations and has to really
Yes.
pause in the first forest and
Yes.
deal with the fact that one left the city under terribly adverse.
Yes.
And it's much more like Dante's experience in his first forest, where he runs into these obstacles that he's not going to get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Faye is not going to integrate all of, he's not going to be able to understand every what he's done while he's communicating with this very alien Beatrice like
Mm,
woman from a better place that's in some ways his guide, in some ways he's sort of attracted to her, and it's complicated,
yeah. Yeah.
and it's interesting, and it's a time to pause and explore what's happened. We, like you said, we don't get that in this forest. We just kind of we get some mentions that there's a little world out here and there, and then we go from, and like to your point, these are very stock locales.
Hmm.
Ice place, ice
Yeah.
cap, even small village. They're all sort of nondescript.
Hmm.
They're in my book over here. What is it? The video game explosion. There's a short chapter in there that talks about the relationship between I think it's in there between Dante creating stock locales like desert, blizzard
Mm,
spot, fire, like boiling blood spot or fireplace, and typical stock zones in early games: fire zone, blizzard zone, forest zone. Um, it seems like mist, forest, ice, we are getting a puppet show. Okay, and so this
hmm.
was to tie it all together, my final point. So Final Fantasy VII, I think we both love because of its epic genre. Epic is amazing, evocative of very powerful emotions, like you mentioned with the callback with the music. There's an attempt at getting its grandeur and raising Final Fantasy IX to that.
Hmm.
Fantasy VIII has many epic convention or explores many epic conventions, but ultimately is also a romance. It's maybe a split genre, but it's certainly not simply an epic. And that divided players on the reception of it. Nine, like you said, seems, even though it might be consciously modeled off of a theatrical performance, it I guess its genre seems like drama,
Hmm.
or puppet drama. Like you said, but puppet theater or drama, and I don't want to say drama because Shakespeare has an immediacy that perhaps epic does not. And this is something that I'm happy to explore because I think Zidane, and this I was going to say earlier, is very Shakespearean in that he has no past in some ways. He's just
Hmm.
constantly
Hmm.
moving into his future. Not like Hamlet or Macbeth, or King Lear, but like one of his younger, more romantic characters from like As You Like It. Perhaps yeah, like a Rosalind. There's an immediacy to him. But I think the scope of this genre, and maybe you'll be able to name it better than I have, or is much more limited
Yeah.
than the two games, and probably even the three, four, five games before it. And I'm going to cheat and use the very final boss as partial evidence for this.
Okay.
Right at the end, we're going to try and increase the scope.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to mention that too much more. I think that's sort of a shadowy way of not spoiling too much, but that perhaps, like you said, this game will attempt to increase the grandeur in various ways. I don't know if it's going to get there. I don't know if it has the structure for it. I don't know if it is the right genre for the same emotional pitch,
Hmm.
or at least the same emotional effect, and maybe even not the same depth of feeling. Though, again, I know that it is going to get where it gets in a profound way, but not yet.
So Yeah, I mean the immediate idea, the type of play we're watching seems to be a comedy so far. I mean it has its stock figures. The play within the play is funny. It's played for laughs. It's entertaining. There is some pathos, um, but it's not really the focus, at least not yet. Um, and so, when the orchestra is playing the march, uh, it's kind of comedic, right? And even the way that um, your Zidane goes over and kicks Steiner like harder than he needs to try to wake him up after he like sprawls out, falls down after Vivi does, right? I mean, it's pretty much just playing everything for laughs. So comedy or farce seems like the surface level at least, and maybe that's delaying or setting up some deeper, more truly dramatic revelations later on. I mean, I think the first village is going to subvert our expectations for what the villages are like in one of these games. But I I don't remember too well. I just that's my sense um, for the whole Black Waltz thing that's happening. Um, there's also one other location besides the little gates. You can barely tell that it's like a place you can visit because it just looks kind of like a rock outcrop. But just past the village, just before the village, depending on how your camera's oriented, there is this like kind of lighthouse type structure. Um, there's a lighthouse keeper or whatever his job is. He's like an old man. He's hanging out in there, and it's very Studio Ghibli kind of feel to it. Like there's some wind and there's some kind of instruments up there that measure the wind and stuff. And and he seems to be involved in some kind of trade. He's in the market for coffee. And he says, "Hey, if you find these kinds of rare coffee, bring them back and share them with me." And he has a little model airship. And Zidane has this kind of strong reaction to the airship where it's like, "Oh yeah, he does kind of miss his friends. He does have a history. He like remembers Lindblom, the town where these things are made, like the land of industry, I guess, and toy making or whatever it is." And so they have like a little interaction there that's really is pretty cool. Um, Again, very missable because it's not like obvious that this is a place you can actually visit. Um, but yeah, so there's again this kind of insistence on the representations of representations within the game, which is interesting, which is if it's farcical, it's also kind of making you think a little bit. And so that's where I'm seeing, you know, it within the humor, some ways that this game is pretty sophisticated. Also with like Steiner doing his elaborate like finishing move, which we don't even know any spells for Steiner yet. So I don't know where this move comes from, but he like slices through the armor that one of the troop is wearing. It might have been Cinna or somebody, and like out pop all these little ooglops or whatever they are. They're like little slimy things, and they're bouncing all around. And it's like this complete send up of the killer move, right? The limit break or the trance move or whatever it is, this cool thing that he does. It just like completely deflates, and deflates him as a character. And it's delightful and it's silly. Again, like the send up of Eris's death immediately after that, where Garnet steps in front of the stage sword and falls, and Steiner thinks she's totally dead. It's like, yeah, I recognize myself and my audience in that moment, like people freaking out about this character dying in the game and them not being able to get her revived in any way, you know. So there is a kind of self-awareness within the game that I think uh, is new, or at least is more salient as opposed to earlier games in the series. Now, like the effect of that, does it break you out of the immersion? Does it, further the themes? I'm not sure yet. I think it's something we have to watch for.
It's interesting when you mention that in the farcical nature of the beginning and how it takes these major themes from at least Final Fantasy 6, 7, and 8 that are really built up, right? Like and impactful, like the death of Ares, like the junctioning of Renoa to Adele, and these highly emotional moments, and the notion of limit break, which is how you end the game in Final Fantasy VII,
Right.
and these huge. This is perhaps what I disliked about
Hmm.
Final
Hmm.
Fantasy IX when I first played it, that it was making us seemingly a farce of these epic conventions that I was looking for. But that makes me think that perhaps part of the genius of this game, if in fact it does have a genius to it, is the same genius as informs Earthbound.
Hmm.
Also, a game that I don't have a ton of experience with. I know that this is your favorite game,
The
but
best
it
game.
does a lot of subverting one's expectations, and very annoyingly, and having a different like action and talk button, unless you know that there is in fact one button that will serve as both.
Right.
Use it correctly. So it's an interesting way to it is thought provoking in that sort of in that it knows what the conventions are,
Mhm.
that you are looking to employ these conventions, and it's going to consciously uh, change these conventions in order to sort of annoy you or and instigate you in a sort of Socratic torpedo fish way towards more thoughtfulness and reflection on the endeavor.
I like that. Yeah. No, I don't remember very well, but the essay about the final boss and what he's doing there, popping out of nowhere, that one does take a kind of Platonic slash Socratic approach. So I think we might be kind of intuiting some of the argument that they're making in that. So that's one that we should read sooner rather than later, although it does, really it's in some sense trying to explain the end, but I think it does it by looking at the beginning and the whole kind of progression of the game.
And
Um,
just
s-
which essay was this? I know we've talked about it before, but just
I I can link it um, the podcast, and I'll put it on the course page. But it's the Necron as Elenchus is what it's called, which is I mean, there can't be many things called that if you just Google that. Um,
I'll link it too in the YouTube video.
yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, yeah, I think what you're talking about with the theater, that's a big theme that the Resonant Arc folks are picking up on for sure. And then what this philosopher Sudoiko is talking about in his essay, I think goes to your kind of wrestling with, what's the genre, what's the approach of this game, what's it doing with the player. So those are uh, two solid places to look. I'm curious what you make of the Legend of book. I've not read any of those, but I'm aware of them as a thing that's out there. Hopefully, you find some good takeaways or good things to
I will,
critique.
I'll certainly bring it back in. I read the Final Fantasy VIII one before this little piece that I just wrote that has been that you know about, but I guess the listeners don't, that has been conditionally accepted by
Yeah.
by a journal, and which after I make that totally accepted by making the edits, I think I will be the expert on Dante and Final Fantasy VII and VIII, at least in terms of who is printed on that. And it will
Nice.
be interesting to see if we can't again talk a little bit more with these sort of video game journalists, analysts.
Hmm.
Again, as we become more solid in our role, I think we'll all offer a very interesting constellation
Hmm.
of experiences people can have related to these games. You know, we're a little pedagogical, certainly analytical, synthetic, very philosophical, but also touch on mythology, linguistics, all sorts of stuff, but intellectual at our root. And
Yeah.
and they too are very exploratory, but in I think very different ways, and often in ways that are very much informed by like media studies,
Yeah.
and right. So I as we continue to become what we are, and I guess further develop our identities, it'll be interesting to see whether we can or what we can offer to the larger community.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that. Um, when the paper's accepted, we've got to, talk it through at some point. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I I really welcome that and look forward to that. And that'll be sooner than later because I've got a pretty tight deadline that I've been given for revisions. And so I'm going to have to work hard and fast. And like I'm under the clock in Final Fantasy VIII, so I'm used to that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting deeper into this game and seeing if we can get from the generic, the in this little, in this hole, there was a hobbit. The Hobbit was named Bilbo, and he becomes more specific as we go, less generic. Perhaps,
Mm,
perhaps this game will do that rather than striving for an immediate impact, or which it did have through its amazing and immaculate introduction, but then fell off from that. I I,
yeah,
I think perhaps we'll quickly get back into the flow of things and find not just seeds, but some evidence of development and
exactly.
some sprouting plants, stems, as it were.
Yeah. So how far should we play for next time? Just kind of through Dali and then maybe I don't really remember after that. I think we reconnect with the airship crew, but I could be wrong. I don't really
Uh,
know.
yeah, I'm forgetting. The mist is not only in the game but also in my mind. So
Mhm.
I'd say just kind of play till where you think is a natural stopping point.
Mm.
I'm going to have some time on a plane. For the listeners, I'm going to Morocco for a conference, and with my wife for a few days. And Wes and I are going to try and talk during that time, just because we've been making it happen in Oxford and Great Barrington, and we want to keep the streak going.
Hmm.
And I think I will have some time on this plane to play a little Final Fantasy IX. Uh,
Cool.
um, I will say one thing about my experience of playing a port on the Switch is it has crashed on me twice.
Ooh,
And it's a PlayStation game. I'm like, this is not like trying to play a game that's also on the PS5, but is also on the Switch or even the PS4, right?
yeah, that's disappointing.
It's disappointing, but luckily when I would reload the game, even though I use the saves and have save slots, it would reload me exactly where it crashed.
Mm.
The one saving grace, because there are a few things worse than a crashing RPG between save points.
Yeah, um these Mughals are in some very strange locations. So unless you're on the world map, yeah, you don't know when your next save is coming. So
No, well, to that point, I look forward wherever our next save comes. I look forward to exploring it with you, and either in the next few days here, or next week, or in the next few days and next week. Uh, I think we've got some rich soil to till coming up. Though this game is by no means as boring as Harvest Moon. Just kidding. I know a lot of people love that game. Um,
I don't really like those kind of games. So
no,
no offense taken here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. If there's anything I don't want to imagine myself as, it's probably a farmer. I think I could go give that a try. Epic Hero, little tougher to just step into those shoes.
Yeah.
If in fact that is what Zidane is, as he's sort of a tailed thief with this crazy trance ability.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
talk about more that seems very much like Super Saiyan, especially the tail. Um, uh, yeah. Well, and I think Super Saiyan 4 or 5, Goku actually turns violet.
That's
So
what I'm saying. Yeah. There's
that
something about the purple. It's a lot like
and the
Terra.
tail is there too. His tail gets long then too. So
Yeah, it's we will have to keep an eye out for more clues. But yeah, but safe travels. If we can talk, we'll do it. But if not, when you get back, it's all good.
well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to rejoining the party when I get back from my little side quest.
Okay.
Hopefully with some new items and things to contribute.
See ya.